Welcome back to Modern Business Podcast. This is the podcast for franchise entrepreneurs. I'm Ryan Hicks, and we have a very esteemed group of folks on the show today, friends, brothers, business partners. I'll say kind of top of house as we frame up this episode. Zach and I were talking kind of going into this new year, and we're going to be mixing up the content here in 2025 that we're putting out on the podcast and beyond. We have been on a 7-year journey doing interviews with the who's who of franchising. And so this year we're really going to focus on some more of our hot takes and, giving our points of view on things. And so for this episode, we're going to give hot takes on 2025 reflections. We're going to make some 2024 reflections, and we're going to make some 2025 predictions across a number of different categories. So this is going to be a very fun episode. Zach, anything else that you have on that topic before we introduce our guests and get this rolling?
Yeah, I mean, I've done, this is my second episode of the year, and we're going to have a couple things being released in the next couple weeks here prior to the IFA. As of this recording, it's about, or give or take, about 3.5 weeks until the IFA happens. And for us, we really wanted to find a way to, Ryan and I hear so much in the margins, and in the hallways of franchising, so to speak. And we felt it was really important to give back to the franchise community in that way. We, for many years, have spotlighted executives that, have wanted to kind of tell their story. And so, the things that we have enjoyed and really our most listened to episodes, and when we have thought leaders from across the industry, really narrow in and harp on a particular topic or topics. And so ultimately, that's really where we decided to take the podcast. You guys, yes, we'll have to listen to Ryan and I drone on and put our stamp on things occasionally, but ultimately this is meant to spotlight some of our brightest minds in franchising for you all to learn about the current trends that are happening in the space, and how those trends are being affected by what's happening in DC and what's happening in local government, and what's happening, on Main Street, all these places that we often talk about at our events, but we really wanted to bring to life, through the podcast. So that's really what today is all about, and what, forevermore, what we'll be doing here.
Yeah. So hot takes, Mr. Zack Fishman. This is going to be a fun journey. We have two folks, as we mentioned, which should be no strangers to a lot of the people in franchising. We have Mr. Jamie Adams. He's the Chief Revenue Officer of Scorpion. He also has some other investments and things that he does. Scorpion's internet marketing company, very, very successful organization, and also someone with some points of view that are I resonate with, and also contrarian points of view. And then we have Ryan Combe, also a business partner. He is the managing partner of Cornerstone Franchise Partners, which has a couple of brands. And I spent a lot of time talking with you guys, and we figured that this format would be fun, just mixing. So we're going to run down a little bit of a docket, kind of inspired by the All In podcast. If you haven't seen that, as we look across these different categories in franchising, the first kind of macro thing that we think about is who was the biggest winner in 2024. And that could mean a lot of things, but Zach, who do you think is the biggest winner in 2024 in franchising?
I don't think that this is an uncommon answer, but the one for me is definitely Jersey Mike's. I think that they were really the winner this year by far, in a year where private equity wasn't really that prevalent, but we did have quite a few, big sales happen. I would say, if I was being more specific, probably Blackstone, but really to me, I think Jersey Mike's in particular is a really big win. They were probably the most well-known unsponsored brand in franchising, and they changed that this year. And a lot of people are a little bit worried about what that's going to mean for the franchise space as a whole. If, one of the most well-known, privately owned, I would say unsponsored brands is now backed by one of the biggest PE firms in the world, but, or probably the biggest, but I do think it's probably good, for franchising, and good for the franchisees of Jersey Mike's as well to, for Peter Cancro to be rewarded for the enterprise value he has built for 50 plus years, which is pretty wild. So
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, that was an $8 billion transaction, as it has been reported, and it's quite incredible. Jamie, what say you? Biggest winner 2024?
So I didn't hone in on, first of all, I don't think I can disagree with Zach's assessment when you think about a single brand, but I honed in on more of a point of view, and that was that, for the most part, 2024 was a pretty rough year. And for a lot of businesses, right? You had inflation. It was an election year. Those are historically, down years and skeptical years in the economy. So I think that organizations that were able to stay focused, stay calm, stay disciplined through what was going to be a down year, and just weather that storm rather than just freak out like so many businesses tend to do. And when you have a little bit of a down season relative to years past, you start, well, we need to change our marketing strategy, or we need to completely change our operational focus. I think the companies that just really got disciplined and said, hey, you know what? This is going to be a difficult year. We're just going to work on execution. We're going to lock arms with our great partners that we know are on our side through thick and thin, and just kind of weathered the storm through the year. I think at least one brand that I know that I feel like did that really, really well is Fast Signs. Really, really big brand, B2B, digital signage, large transactions. They made some bets and changed some things, but large in part, they just focused on their sales funnel, right? Driving leads, maximizing the conversion of those leads operationally, following up every lead that came through the door, making sure that their store owners, their franchise owners rather, had good discipline on follow up. And, I think, again, I don't want to get ahead and disclose what their revenue growth was like, but I would say it was a really good positive year, and I think they would say the same. So that's my consensus.
Jamie, I love that point of view. As I kind of looked at it, it's like I think we have a year of headwinds going into a year of tailwinds. And that's a really good point of view. Ryan, what say you? Biggest winner 2024?
So first off, I'm going to comment on a couple things. So one, Jersey Mike's, that's interesting, because when I first got into franchising, like 2008, 2009, and I was growing my brand to the east, I saw my first Jersey Mike's when we opened in South Jersey, and looking up, I mean, like, I cannot believe these guys have like 2,000 locations and none of them are west of the Mississippi, right? And then they started opening, and all of a sudden it just like kind of went crazy. And so Jersey Mike's is interesting because, like, to me, Jersey Mike's didn't exist 15 years ago, and now they just got bought by, if not the biggest, probably the most well-known private equity. And then, like what Jamie said with Fast Signs, I don't know of a brand. I certainly don't know of a brand outside of food that is more dialed in to the unit level economics of their business more than Fast Signs. And so I think they're able to do that stuff because they literally know what's going on a line item by line item basis with their franchisees more than any brand that I can think of, again, outside of food, because food, fast food like QSR, they got to be dialed in. But my biggest winner for 2024 is going to be FSOs. So outsourced franchise sales organizations, and you could push / brokers. I think we're the biggest winners of 2024. You're seeing, or we have seen over the last few years, this massive shift to brands pretty much exclusively using brokers and FSOs, where I think 3 years ago, Zinc was starting with Fastlane, and there were some other people that were dipping their toes in it. But now it's like, I know more brands that exclusively use brokers and FSOs than are doing in-house franchise sales at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, but isn't there, just a couple questions on that, or one question? Isn't there a lot of like backlash and
Yes.
there was a lot of complaining about that earlier, at least earlier in 2024. And I'm not as dialed in on the FSO side of the world as you guys are, but just interested in your take on that. You're calling that the biggest winner, but just a few months ago, I'm hearing about people that hate FSO. So what's the point of view?
Yeah,
there?
they could be the biggest winners, like bond salesmen were the biggest winners of 2007, right? Their success could ultimately drive their demise. Right.
I think in a lot of ways too, Jamie, and something I know that Ryan will likely touch on if he were to answer, if he were quicker than me on this. But I believe that in a lot of ways they are winners, because it has become a massive option for brands, and when they are being packaged up by a lot of the consulting firms, it is the natural place that they go, because more companies, home and commercial service is probably the second, if not the largest, industry of brand that is being started today, and I would say B, a lot of that legislation has now been cleaned up and professionalized because the IFA has stepped in and really put their shoulder behind it. In a lot of ways, in earnest, I think that really legitimized the space as, a real player at the table. Whereas before in the past, I think that it was kind of like a little hush hush, like, should we back them? Should we not? Like, nobody really knew. And I think this year, Matt Haller really made it very clear the IFA's stance, and they have a task force that they have enabled with both, CEOs of broker organizations and CEOs of FSOs that are really a part of this, that, they're willing to work in the sandbox with them, which I think in the past, the IFA was candidly a little bit afraid to do so because they were considered a bit untouchable in a lot of ways. And look, I think even at our own event that Ryan and I hosted last year, at YoungCon, a lot of people accused us after the fact and really behind closed doors, and I won't say names, but they were a little bit annoyed at how anti-FSO it appeared, and I think it was just
that tied into what you were talking about, Jamie.
Wait, they said that Springboard appeared anti-FSO?
Young Conference.
YoungCon?
So there was a lot of railing because at the time, early in the year, we were under a Biden administration, and Lena Khan was head of, at her perch and all the rest. And so there was a lot of comparing. If you remember, there was the real estate ruling that came out in March. I remember on my way from Unconference to the airport, and they stepped in and said, you have to disclose around the fees. And if you look at it, there's a lot of solid argument around a franchise prospect should know what the fees are. And that gets a very charged conversation started. And so under a Biden administration, with Biden appointed folks, there was just a lot of kind of growing drumbeat. And then the political winds changing have obviously changed things. But if you boil it down to brass tacks, and to put a bow on this, Zach, you were right. We had too many categories. But to put a bow on this, I was gonna answer Jersey Mike's, because in dollars and cents, a founder story that built the business and monetized at $8 billion has to be the winner. But if you think about it, to weave in everything that you guys said, private equity coming into franchising, you can argue goods, bads, and indifference. The fact of the matter is private equity is in pretty much every single sector. If it's
right. They're the drivers of all of it. They're the drivers of the FSOs. They're the drivers of everything.
The winner here is brokers help brands propel success, and private equity gives founders monetization path. And so I think this just reinforces, and Zach, you're writing this M&A column where every quarter you're breaking down all the different transactions that are happening as private equity has really infiltrated franchising. And so I think if I were to edit my response from Peter Cancro, it would just be the founders. You have to also remember Blackstone acquired Tropical Smoothie Cafe. So there's just a lot of stuff here. And I'd like to riff on that topic more, but in haste,
I will. Can I say something too, though? Sure. Not to cut you off, Hicks. I laugh, and I guess I'll apologize because I'm laughing remembering who was hosting the Fran Dev section of YoungCon. He may or may not be part of this podcast, but I do think I think it will be interesting to see how some of these regulations affect that.
Agreed.
Yeah, and Ryan, I know you have contrarian points of view on the broker thing. Haven't gone to market with brokers and been there, but really having largely built the success of your career going to market without brokers. And so, who do you guys predict as the biggest winner, whether it's brand or constituency or whatnot, in 2025? Zach.
I would say for me, and conversations that I've had since I've gotten back, institutional investors are definitely going to be my winner for this year, because they all thought that they were absolutely screwed until this year. It was really the survive for 25 or thrive in 25 or whatever mantra you want to use. Everybody was really, really worried in 22, 23, and 24. There was a lot of transactions in 20 and 21 because interest rates were historically low. And it got to 22, and I thought I was going to be checking my email every 15 seconds for a new deal, just like it had been in the past 2 years before that. But it just never came. Interest rates shot way the hell up, and I think that ultimately it really drew, it forced deal flow to grind to a halt. I think in a lot of ways, institutional investors now, for brands that traded in the past 5 to 7 years, are happy that their enterprise value is now back to, fairly decent levels where they're going to be able to trade, to the next, up the private equity ladder, as Alicia Miller, often cites. I think that you're going to see a lot of people who were, in founder-led funds, for instance, like an NPK or others that are around that many folks that are listening know all about, that are going to go to their second investment here. I would say probably, if not this year, then probably early next. In conversations that I've had off the record with many folks, I probably have, I think my number is like 31 brands that are either in process with an investment bank, or they are going to be in process, or they're looking for a deal, on a proprietary basis with the PE firm directly. And that's without me even digging into food and beverage, really, which is pretty crazy if you really think about it. Because last year I maybe had 6 on a running basis, and right now it's like over 30, which is really nuts. So I would say institutional investors is definitely my answer.
Yeah, so if you guys don't know, Zach literally is probably the world's foremost expert in franchise lists, and I get updates on all of his things, brands looking and all the rest. Jamie, prediction 25.
Yeah, I want to be on Zach's shared spreadsheet for that one. We all got a glimpse of his spreadsheet for his packing habits in Thailand. But
yeah, Zach's a list guy. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Zach's the foremost authority on any list. You want to know restaurants in California? Talk to Zach. He's got a list.
And by the way, it'll take him 13 seconds to respond. Maybe that.
Yeah. So my biggest winner prediction for 25 is the organizations. So let me back up. Zach mentioned something a couple minutes ago about the growth and explosion in residential and commercial service businesses. And if you look across the board, where there's been a lot of private equity activity inside franchise and outside franchise in the last several years, particularly since the COVID years, it's been in those two categories, right? So in order for that level of success to continue for those investors, the franchise organizations, particularly the ones in home services and commercial services, who activate the right local marketing or business development campaigns and allocate the right budgets and resources to compete and win business there, they're going to be the biggest winners. One of the biggest problems that I see in franchise is franchisors who don't have the discipline to really push and challenge their franchisees to spend the right dollars in the right places in local marketing. And they typically use the excuse of, well, we can't tell our franchisees what to do. That violates something. I'm not saying you have to tell them what to do, but you have to be really, really specific, and you just have to be real with them, right? Most franchisees most franchise businesses in residential services and commercial services, their number one competition in their local market are not other franchise brands. They are other large, independent local businesses that are not afraid to spend money in marketing. And they're not afraid to hire the right business development teams to go out, if you're B2B, and actually shake the tree and develop relationships to win business. So the biggest winners in franchise, particularly in those categories, are going to be the brands and the franchisees that spend the right dollars, the right resources in the right places on a local level so that they can actually continue to grow the revenue, continue to make the brand attractive to institutional investors, and hopefully, achieve an outcome on their own as well somehow. So that's my hot take.
Yeah, and then one way to expand that and kind of deliver that message as a franchisor is leverage data. You're not just sitting on a perch saying use this. Leverage the information that you have and be nimble with how you go about it. And then also there's something to be said about co-ops, because franchisees get scared when other franchisees come into your market. That is a good thing. You want that. You want franchisees in the neighboring markets, because now that's how you build bigger brand power. But Ryan, what do you say 2025 prediction?
So first I do want to add to Jamie. So the brands that are like, we don't want to tell our franchisees what to do, or we can't, like, that's exactly why they bought a franchise, is for you to tell them what to do. If they could figure that out on their own, they wouldn't have bought a franchise. Right. And so I always think that's funny when you hear franchisors, and I understand it, right? I've been a franchisor. I know the battle that exists. I literally just went through it 30 minutes before this call with a franchisee. Like on the battle of getting them to spend on local marketing. And one of the biggest issues we've had with one of our brands is that we give them so much national work that we can't get them to spend on local marketing. But I think Jamie is very, very right with that. Like, you got to be dialed in, you got to figure out, and you got to give a path to your franchisees and almost shove them down it to get that local marketing done. Yep. But my winner for 2025, my prediction, this is Homer based, but it's going to be Utah franchising. Like, Crumble is about to sell for like over $2 billion. You got 5-star franchising in Utah that is doing a ton. Sizzlin' Platter continues to grow as like one of the largest franchisees in the world. It just seems like, from when I got into franchising 15 years ago, I could have told you like the 3 people I know that work in franchising in the state of Utah. And now it just seems like Utah is exploding in the franchise space. And so again, it's a stacked deck, because you've already heard what's happening with Crumble and some of that stuff. But I think that Utah is going to be a big winner this year.
I like that answer. Solid. That's insightful. Well done, Combe.
My Texas in me, for my prediction for 2025, my Texas in me wants to argue against that. But the fact is that I actually had that slated as my biggest winner. The reason why is I think you measure success in dollars and cents. Ultimately, obviously, that's opening up an attack vector, because there's a whole can of worms within that. But end of the day, you have a business that was founded in 2017. And they went through the hype cycle, and everyone said, "Hey, this is the next fad." And I'm not saying that franchisees. I
said that. I said that.
But fact of the matter is that franchisor did 2 things very well. In 2023, revenues fell off a cliff. Franchisees were panicking. There were murmurs of all these different things, and the headquarters listened, and they made changes, and 2024 was up and to the right, and franchisees were making money. And at the end of the day, that's what propels franchising. So for Crumble's exploring a $2 billion sale. Last reported financials of 2023 show $122 million in revenue, 81 million. This is for the franchisor entity, 81 million coming from royalties. Their affiliate, Crumble Foods LLC, also did $31 million from selling recipes, cookie mixes, etc. And the business was founded in 2017 and completely bootstrapped. And so I think whatever your take on that category, it's really awesome to see franchise organizations create those big wins. So to me, in and of itself, that's a massive win. And to me, that's likely to be the biggest win in 2025. So, Zach.
For what it's worth, I never thought it was a fad. I just always enjoyed dominating their cookies. So, yeah,
yes.
Still do.
Yes. Zach, breakout brand of the year. What do you say? Reflect for 2024 and also give us 2025.
I think that for 2024, for me, if I'm really thinking about it, it's more blanket in industry, in my opinion. I think that, if I were being asked this a couple years ago, like home and commercial, like duh, like obviously that's like pretty much what makes the most sense to me. But if I'm really honing in a little bit further, I would have said home probably. Today, I think it's commercial services. I think it's kind of making a comeback. I think it made a little bit of a comeback in 24, and you saw quite a few transactions in that space. You saw a platform being formed that Riverside formed for the first time in Eversmith. They gave it a name at the end of 23, and then in 24 they started to really build a really nice platform with US Lawns and Prism Specialties and a lot of other brands from around the space that people probably don't wake up in the morning thinking that they want to become franchisees of, but all of them have their place in the industry. And as really the B2B service, and I would say overall commercial service base has come back as people are going back into offices again. I think 2024 was really the year people going back into the office. I remember I did a post, I think in I want to say March or late February, when I returned to my office for the first time last year. And I just fondly remember, just how much really changed in that industry. Grant Marks from Riverside did a really nice job of building that platform. And there was a couple other investments of some other brands. And I know that, the Ryan and Ryan on the podcast here are very heavily, involved in the commercial side of it. And so you guys saw this too, clearly. So I think that would probably be my breakout brand / industry from last year, was really commercial services, just because I think that it was something that was very old school. It was really just commercial cleaning for many years. And I think that now it's becoming more diversified. And I just think it's going to be a really nice aspect of franchising that's going to become professionalized, and really did last year.
Combe, breakout brand.
Geez, I don't know, because one, you just changed up the batting order on me.
Did that on purpose?
I thought I was in the hole, but apparently I was on deck. And so I will, and my ADD was getting the best of me, because then I was on this big long thing of commercial services.
You want me to jump in, and then we can come back
for a second. Jamie.
I'll save you. I got you, man. So my breakout brand was Fastest Labs. So hear me out a little bit, right? So brand that had some success, obviously, during COVID, as did a lot of these kind of lab testing companies. COVID kind of does its thing, falls away, becomes normalized. And Fastest Labs, in full transparency, they are a Scorpion customer. But one of those brands that kind of had, I wouldn't call it an identity crisis, but kind of like, hey, what do we do now that the COVID thing is gone? How do we go drum up business? And they really locked arms with us and some other of their core partners, and helped kind of come up with a strategy to revitalize and drive more business through other means to their franchise locations. And from all accounts, had a fantastic year. Sold a lot of new franchises as well. So had a lot of growth from a franchise development perspective. So yeah, that's my breakout brand of 2024.
I'll go. I definitely want to piggyback a couple of the things. I could riff on, Zach, what you said. And, it ties into, if you think about what drove the success of Crumble, which we talked about in the previous category, it was several different things, with their footprint and simplicity of, employee count, highly repeatable, executable business model, a social brand, and all of the rest. And one of the things was their social following and their ability to speak directly to customers. And so, Zach, as you talk about commercial, like the unsexy, like facilities type things, the way to replicate that, I call it the Golden Arches strategy, right? You put up McDonald's. This is what every franchise brand says they have. You put up the logo and you get business, right? Well, in home service, commercial service, it doesn't really work like that, and especially commercial service. But there are brands out there replicating that in a way through national accounts. But what I'm going to actually do is so that I could look at that, but what I would say to me is as I look at groups like down in Austin, Texas, Resi Brands, and I'm not necessarily speaking particularly to any of their brands, but I just got saw a thing from IFA. They have Cody Sanchez that's going to be headlining the IFA convention. I think I actually should go look at that. But at the end of the day, I think it's a win for franchising when people that were really on kind of Main Street that are now talking about franchising and discovering franchising. And you have all different paths to franchising and to entrepreneurship and business ownership. There's entrepreneurship through acquisition. There's the whole online world where today it's easier, the barriers to entry. You can set up a Shopify website in like a day. You can build app. Like there's 1,000 ways, sell course. There's so many ways that you see online and in the Twitterverse to build a business. But I just love seeing companies like Resi Brands create a partnership with someone like Cody Sanchez that has a big following. It elevates kind of franchising. And I remember meeting that founding team at Springboard for the first time. Zach, you introduced me. We were at Springboard hosting Springboard and had a conversation with them, and they had 14 units at the time. And he was telling me his vision, and I'm notorious to have I'll have a bolt of something. I'll tell Zach or Ryan, and he's like, dude, that's a little crazy. And then we turn around and we make it happen. But these guys did that and a lot more. So yeah, I would say kudos to what they've done at Resi Brands. Combe, what say you?
So, I'm passing on this one. I'm not. I have it down, but in my notes I have the same thing down twice, and I think it's better fit for another spot.
No
But I
worries.
do, building on what everybody else has been saying. It is interesting to see how big of a movement you're seeing back towards commercial um, services, and especially because so much money went into home services for obvious reasons. But coming back, and then it really, I do think you're going to see more and more, and we're going to talk about this in the future. But Hicks, to your point, where brands are really going out, they're service brands, right? Because if you're a brick and mortar retail business, then you're bringing business in from like loyalty and different things like that. But with service brands, it's typically been like people have to go out and find you. And franchisees, when they buy a franchise, they have to develop an area and really work and to do it, to build a business. I think you're going to see more businesses take that initiative of saying, we're going to build big national accounts and we're going to give those to our franchisees.
Couldn't agree more. And there are both opportunities and challenges within that. And I could mix on this topic for days. Zach, what is our next topic as we get back on? So
Well,
I'm going to skip this one. Let's go to the water cooler award. So biggest disruptor or boldest move of 2024 and prediction for 2025. Zach, what say you?
I would say that the biggest disruptor in 2024 to me was that there was. It's really funny how many brands this man bought, but the CEO of Craveworthy, Greg Majewski, is somebody who I remember him telling me this in 2023. Full disclosure, he is a client of Fishman PR, and he came to me and said, I need somebody who speaks finance to be able to help me out. And I said, what does that mean, Greg? And he goes, you'll see. And that's all he said. And he then followed by, I think I just counted, he bought 8 brands in 2024, which is pretty remarkable if you really think about it, right? That is crazy disruption. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that everybody loved what he was doing, but it definitely turned a lot of heads. That's for damn sure. So I think a lot of people really started to pay attention to what he was doing. He really underlined, bolded, and italicized restaurant aggregator in as many ways you possibly can. So that's really one that I would say was a big, bold move. And I would say for 25, a pretty big water cooler moment for me is when I first saw that Orange Theory and, self-esteem brands were going to be merging into what is now Purpose Brands. That was a pretty big, interesting thing to me. Roar Capital had been rumored for many years to be thinking about doing so. But in a lot of ways, it was because, Dave and Chuck at Self-Esteem, and then, Dave Long and Orange Theory, they just kind of wanted to run their own thing, and they were bought individually and they wanted to keep it as such. But, I think that it got to a point now where, they were looking for economies of scale, and it happened. And I think that this year, Self-Esteem has tried a couple times to buy brands, and they've kind of been to varying results in my opinion. I think that this year, in a lot of ways, I would say fitness, and to a degree, health and I would say wellness and a little bit beauty are really going to start to see a ton of growth. There might be some divestments that they have that they own that they might try to kind of narrow their focus on what they want to buy. But I just think that was fascinating to me to see that they finally did that, because it was long rumored for a while, and there wasn't really a good reason why it hadn't happened yet. And then it broke, I remember, in April, and it really in earnest started January of this year. So that's pretty interesting.
It's
so
like
Zach, you think that's going to be a breakout for this year, though?
I do, because I think in a lot of ways they have been pretty dormant for a long time in terms of trying to buy brands. They haven't bought a new brand there for shit. I think they bought a new brand there when Ryan and I were there in person 5.5 years ago. They had just purchased Basecamp, which was a corporate brand.
We did a workout in that gym.
We did the workout and almost died. But I'd say that this year, I believe that there is going to be a lot of moving and shaking. Roar Capital has historically, they haven't dipped back into fitness for a while, and everything I'm hearing is that fitness is going to be crazy. Crunch Fitness is up for was publicly disclosed as being for sale at this point. That could be something that could really fit nicely into their portfolio. Roar obviously has the money, so I think that there is there's a lot of interest in that as like a big box gym like that is kind of further up market in terms of price. So there's a lot of reasons why I think it's possible that.
And so this is a bold move. And just to underscore kind of the entire conversation, franchising is 200 different industries, probably more, but call it 200 different industries. And they go kind of in cycles, and there's new trends. But if you look at what Planet Fitness, who's had some challenges and also a lot of big successes, as I remember some of the political news that was going on, but Planet Fitness, Crunch Fitness. And so I do think that was a really bold move. And what Orange Theory Fitness did, you got to think about the market share of some of these swaths of categories. You're not talking about billions or tens of billions. You're talking about hundreds of billions and perhaps trillions if you're talking about the greater wellness. And so there are going to be so many winners inside of that. I do agree that was a bold move. Jamie, bold moves 2024, 2025 predictions.
Well, I think I touched on, did I not touch on 24? I guess I didn't, huh? No, breakout brands, yeah? Or bold moves? What are we talking about here?
Bold moves.
And now I'm the one that's been thrown out. Okay, well
I'm ready to go here,
I can
Jamie,
do this. No, I can do. I'm gonna jump into the fire. So bold moves for 2024 that will pay off in 2025. How about that?
Let's do it.
There you go.
I like that.
I'm gonna say Massage Heights rebrand and refocus from Massage Heights to the Heights Wellness Retreat. I think it takes a lot of guts to take a brand that has good brand equity, that has achieved scale, and look at the market and say, hey, we've got an opportunity to continue down the path that we were on, but expand our services in ways that kind of align with consumer demand in the current day, and make a big change. So I think the way that Shane so far has kind of executed the announcement of that, gotten buy-in from her existing franchise owners, has kind of come up with a plan on how to roll this out throughout 2025. I think is going to pay back big, and I think that it's actually going to expand business for her existing franchise owners. and it's going to create a lot of buzz for new franchise prospects, in a way that she is kind of driving differentiation between, that what was the Massage Heights brand, or I guess what still currently is, but is transitioning, but away from other brands in that market that they historically compete against. I think she's creating some good differentiation. So again, bold move, hard to drive a rebrand period, especially when that rebrand involves an expansion of services. But I think it's going to pay off, and I think you're going to start to see the fruits of that this year in 2025.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to say before we dive in, because I know that Ryan is going to be slightly conflicted out on this, I do want to say publicly that one of the things that I found to be most fascinating about that is A, when Shane first said that to me, I thought she was crazy. B, when she actually went forward and did it, rave reviews by all the finance community, because there's a reason that I actually didn't that I had thought of that I didn't realize that they were following too, which was the number one most emerging competitor in chain space, Hand and Stone, didn't have massage in their name. That was a huge advantage that nobody really thought about. And it allowed them to be able to add ancillary services without anybody really turning an eye. And AUVs went up and up and up. And Shane didn't really have that reality because she had massage in the name. And you don't really think about how much that's going to deter you. One of the beautiful things, I think, in her doing that is that investment community now believes that there is a higher ceiling for her. AUVs will probably shoot up 20 to 25%. I bet Ryan will have better numbers than me, but I'd say that it's going to make a massive difference for her franchisees. I think that her system will become much more professionalized, and I think that her enterprise value alone overnight, if the actual execution of the brand refresh does what we all think it will, I think that we'll be talking about her in 26 as a big winner, I think.
Well, I'll add my color, and just for disclosure, the CEO of Massage Heights is my girlfriend, now Heights Wellness Retreat. And that was clearly my winner, or really the boldest move, because you have to remember, she stepped back into the business in 2024. She had hired a professional CEO. She stepped back in the business because first it was mission driven. Is at the bottom line, she wants to grow. She's been with a lot of these franchisees for many, many, many years. The business has been in existence for 19. I think they just celebrated their 20th anniversary as a franchisor. And so that was the focus, is how do we take our 1.2 million AUVs and drive them up? One of the things that Hand and Stone has done very well is they do facials very well. Hand and Stone is a phenomenal brand. And, Heights has struggled, Zach, for the exact same reason that you talked about on the facial side, is because massage is in the name. And so as you look at trends for the next generation coming, as you look at some of what that organization calls innovations, touchless therapies, things that it's very tough to hire and maintain the high quality of therapists. But as you have these new inroads, therapists are going to be very excited to also prescribe other holistic situations. And so they're creating this experience around what they call the Cloud9 experience. And it's going to be awesome. It's going to be fun to watch. It was certainly with stepping in and doing a brand, evolution, I think is how they frame it. That is a very bold move.
Yeah, agreed.
So, but if you look, if there is a sector that is dominated by trends, it is health and wellness, right? Like keto diet to CrossFit to Atkins to, whatever it is, you're constantly, you've got to adapt all the time. And I remember talking to somebody at Rourke, probably 5 or 6 years ago, about Orange Theory. And they legitimately said that it is part of their business plan and budgeting that they may have to redo the entire strategy of Orange Theory every 10 years. Swap out equipment, swap out what classes were like they went into that brand knowing that they were going to have to make a lot of changes. And so I mean, that's where that merger, like the merger with Self-Esteem, makes sense, because you look at like the other wellness things that Self-Esteem brings, whether it's like Pilates or like whatever, or Barre, whatever. But it's there. So, and then like with the Heights thing, their locations were crushing it, right? Like they were doing over $1 million a year, and it's like the cool thing about all those businesses is it's subscription based. So it's just like on the first of every month, you just wake up to $100,000 in your bank account. And so it's a big deal to kind of do that, because you certainly could just kind of sit back and rest on your laurels and let that cash keep flowing in. With me, the boldest move I've saw that I think will continue to pay off is this is a little different, but Chick-fil-A. I cannot believe over the last year how many Chick-fil-A locations I've seen close down for 2 to 3 months to do a complete remodel, to add additional drive-through lanes, to add different things so that more and more people can drive through. And when you look, like the average unit volume of a Chick-fil-A location, I think, is $4.7 million.
Up, bro. It's 8.
Maybe I'm talking across the whole system, but whether it's 4 or 8, it takes a lot of guts to say we're going to close down a location for 4 months because you are talking about millions of dollars that won't come in. How hard, and I don't even know how they handled it with all of their employees, but how many employees, teenage employees does a Chick-fil-A have? But that to me is like, that was the craziest thing. I obsessed over it for a little bit. I just could not believe that they were closing down all of these locations to redo it. And so I think you're going to continue to see that too, like as with more and more brands, is that it's about a parking lot. It's about a drive-through. Like few and few people are walking into the lobby of a restaurant. You're going to see more brands that are going to have the guts, to bite the bullet and be like, look, we're closing down for 3 to 4 months so that we can maximize our return on drive-through and app pickup and that whole thing.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good take, Combe. Do we want to insert a commercial for Appel line striping within here as well? But
we certainly could. I mean, we are about to start doing stuff for Chick-fil-A. But yeah, it's crazy to think about that.
Ryan, I think that's a really awesome, bold move, because they did do that in mass and are continuing to do it. Other brands such as Taco Bell and the like all of these groups with drive-throughs are really rethinking that strategy as you have a lot more traffic from DoorDash. I think the number, I forget the statistics, but a significantly decreasing amount of folks are actually going into the lobby.
It's about 30%.
Of these groups. Wow. And I just checked
down 30%.
As of 2023, the latest FDD shows AUVs were a record 9.3 million. I don't know what that was in 2024. And they're closed on Sunday, which is crazy. Absolutely.
So 9.3 Hicks?
Yeah. That was as of 2023.
That is absurd.
Yeah, it's insane.
So, gentlemen, if anyone wants to pipe in, did anyone have a quick hot take on the rookie of the year?
Just so you know, that's an average of 3.3 million. So if a location closed down for 4 months to do the remodel, you're talking over $3 million lost.
Wow,
it's crazy.
What I gotta know. All right, this is I'm putting Hicks and Zack. I'm putting you guys on this to get some sort of interview. What was the research that went into that? Because you can't do that on a hope and a prayer. Like you would have to have some pretty hardcore data to go tell somebody we're going to close you down and you're going to have to lose $2 to $4 million here over the next few months. Like you would have to have an unbelievable model to show how that's worth it.
I have no idea. I saw the CEO of Chick-fil-A speak at QSR Evolution in 23. And he previewed and actually premiered that they were going to be doing this in 24. And I remember you had all the writers for QSR and FSR magazine, because that's who was hosting the conference. They were sitting there in the front row, right? Because it was like breaking news, and they don't break news. They're not really as much of a newsbreaker. So they had a scoop before NRN, before NRN and Restaurant Business did. And so they were stoked. So I remember they had people like writing in the back row, and that's who I had been talking to before because, you know, PR, journalists, whatever. So like, it just was so fascinating. They like interrupted the conversation when they heard Mr. Cathy say that, and they were like, I gotta go, and they like started like furiously typing. It was pretty wild.
Zach, is this why you started a Twitter X account so you could start? Because you are a source of news. You do have a lot of stuff you know.
And I mean, I had one this year. That was it. That I scooped that I was told was not cool, and I needed to give them the scoop beforehand. But you know, no, I would say it's just fun to be able to follow all their stuff. But very interesting. I wonder what went into that. I could only imagine. I don't.
Yeah.
Different topic. You go ahead. Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, go ahead, Jamie, because I'm going to change. I'm going to move.
I was going to say a different topic for another day, but I'm just fascinated that there is so much demand for fried chicken tenders and nuggets that brands like Chick-fil-A and Raising Cane's and Zaxby's and name the next several still just make boatloads of money, and all they sell is fried chicken.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my winner. Was chicken. Chicken was going to be, but I debated
it's fascinating.
Do you want to know, as a consumer, because I actually don't ever think about this. Me personally, I could never operate a food business, or I wouldn't say never or never, but you know, investor and all the rest in food. I love food as the category. It's half of all franchise organizations are food. But as I think about me as a consumer, and that goes into what you said, this is actually an insight. Why do I order Chick-fil-A? Because I order Chick-fil-A. I get their grilled nuggets, and if I'm hungover, I get the fried. You know, that and Sonic are my two things if I'm hungover. But it's the fact that it's fast, and that is actually part of the strategy. Because the Chick-fil-A isn't like super close to me, but it's here, and I live in a high rise in Dallas, and it's here in 12 minutes or less. And that's probably because they've really kind of thought through the traffic flows for, you know, the delivery pickups and all the rest.
But forget the delivery pickups. And again, I know we need to move on, but just drive by any Chick-fil-A or Raising Cane's and just look at the drive-through traffic. It's always packed. It is insane. Always. I just don't understand the consumer mindset.
Chick-fil-A is In-N-Out. Like the only restaurant you could ever drive by that constantly has 10 cars in their drive-through is In-N-Out. But the difference is that Chick-fil-A probably goes through 4x transactions, 4 times the transactions in an hour that In-N-Out does.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can contemplate that later. Maybe go do some research on, like, you know, what is up with people's fascination with fried chicken and fried chicken tenders.
Yeah, because it's tasty, Jamie. So moving on.
You look at my 19-year-old's bank statement, like it is like legitimately 80% of his transactions is Raising Cane's.
Yeah. Gentlemen, the reason why we got that little mix up is because I did skip around. I did skip a couple things, so I think that's what confused you. But very quickly, and then we're going to move into a lightning round because I think we have some time constraints here. Any rookie of the years? Zach?
Yeah, I would actually say that a pretty big rookie of the year for me, realistically, man, I have to kind of choose because
Pressure's on, Zach. You're the most equipped to answer this question. Pressure's on.
We're gonna boot you to Uranus if you don't have something good. All in podcast reference.
You know, for me, I think it's actually probably an industry, and I'll distill it a little bit further for a second because I think it is kind of important in that regard. I think in a lot of ways that there has been a massive amount of growth in the fast casual industry in general. I think that over the years, food and beverage has gotten much more nuanced. It's no longer QSR and FSR as we know. I would say fast casual has become, a lot more common. And then I would say there's really a fourth category that's become, really interesting, and that's LSR. It doesn't have a magazine called that yet, but it will, I'm sure, at some point. LSR meaning, the types of brands that you go to where you go up to a counter and you order and you have a runner that brings it to you, right? So it is a little bit more of a premium experience, but it's a little bit more elevated in price. But I would say that it is realistically how more Americans are eating, because many folks are, fine dining numbers are way, way down over the course of time. And so they want a more elevated experience. But at the same time is of the essence. And so it's a really interesting middle ground that has been added between fast casual and FSR now, that is becoming really emergent. And so for me, I'm seeing a ton of categories that are doing this at the moment, at Franchise Elevator especially, and a lot of the packaging firms. They don't really have a name for it right now, but I have dubbed it LSR, and a lot of the journalists that are writing on this, like Jonathan Mays and Danny Klein and Alicia Kelso, and a lot of those folks, Sam Okus, a lot of those people at all the trades and restaurants are writing about this phenomenon, and it's becoming, I would say, a lot more common. To be specific, there are a lot of brands that I can call out that are kind of doing this in particular. But one that comes to mind to me, which I think is fairly interesting, is they have innovated on the breakfast space, which is Biscuit Belly. Biscuit Belly is a brand where you go up to a counter, you order a biscuit sandwich, and they have a runner bring it to you. You could order alcohol if you wanted, but the difference is that it's not like you're going to another Broken Egg or First Watch, where like you go and you sit down and you have like a nice little homely, rustic, environment in there. It has that, but at the same time, it's a bit more modern, a bit younger. There's a lot of examples of that in different industries. But I would say that that's ultimately what my answer would be, is LSR, limited service restaurants.
Interesting. Does anything jump out at you guys for this category? Do you want to move it along? Either one, Jamie, Ryan.
Nothing for me. I'm glad that Zach actually threw out a brand. I know he mentioned he started with the category, and I was struggling to think of a brand that would be a good reference, but I thought that was a really good one. So, but I'm just not close enough to the emerging side, to be honest with you. It'd be disingenuous to me to say something otherwise. So nothing for me on this one.
Yeah. So let's go to lightning round. We'll do our best to be quicker as we move towards closing here. So 2024's game-changing innovation. We live in a world right now where everyone's talking about artificial intelligence, and there are social and economic and technological kind of trends that are converging. The world's a very fast-moving pace. So what say you, Zach, on 2000, and not to pigeonhole this into those categories, I'm saying it's noisy and it's hard to decipher, and I'm interested to hear your takes on this. 2024 game-changing innovation could be a technology, could be a process, etc. What do you say, Zach?
I think I have two. One of which is, I would say, more home service driven, and I would say the other one is more restaurant driven. So I'll start with the restaurant one. I think the idea, and you hit on this a little bit, Ryan, but the idea of prototype innovation with food and beverage, and I would say specifically people through drive-through, has been really interesting. I recall, many years ago, Ryan Hicks, we got a message from a guy on LinkedIn that was looking to innovate, restaurant drive-throughs, where it was innovating not only delivery but also pickup as well.
Yep.
And that's becoming something that's super prevalent, that a lot of brands, it's a simple thing, but they in either new prototypes with new builds, or they've kind of done what Chick-fil-A did, not quite to the same scale, but they did with kind of redoing drive-throughs and the like, to really enhance the modern consumer. Is really fascinating. I can tell you that we are commenting on this. My team is doing a lot of this in the media. You're seeing it with other PR firms that are doing the same. I think that's pretty fascinating. A lot of folks are really gravitating towards that, which I think is pretty cool. I'd say the other thing that I think is pretty fascinating too is that there are quite a few brands in home service that are opting more towards, many of them rely on call centers. And I know, Ryan, you probably would be getting into this, but you were seeing a massive shift to, AI call answering and things of the like in the home service space, and in commercial to a degree too, but mostly home. People who are, and Jamie, I know, can speak on this all day, I'm sure. But there is a lot of innovation going on in that world, and it's pretty nascent at the moment. But I'd say that we're going to see a lot of people supply on the vendor side that are going to be rushing the market on this part, and kind of trying to almost displace what was a very human capital centric part of home service, which was really answering phone calls in volume, from a volume perspective. I just think that that's going to be a pretty big shift in how people are employing and P&Ls, and I think it will be able to drive enterprise value for a lot of these home service brands as they go to trade again, in the next couple of years here.
Solid. Jamie, what about you? Innovations. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything, around AI. I mean, I know that we could spend a lot of time just talking about how people have innovated just using Chat GPT, right? But I think more specifically, I'll take a stance and expand on what Zach said. There are some companies in the home services space that have really kind of accelerated the use of AI to truly improve business processes. One that comes to mind is a company called Rilla. And Rilla basically provides kind of an AI-driven leadership management coaching product for field technicians. So imagine you hire a plumber to come to your house. The plumber shows up, and obviously the business that employs said plumber wants to maximize that experience, to maximize the dollars you're going to spend. Plumber walks in with their cell phone. They've got the entire kind of interaction between them and the homeowner recorded. That recording is then uploaded into Rilla's platform. They use a lot of AI and machine learning to basically give feedback and coaching to that technician, and then also to the leadership of the company. And I know, just looking at their growth and expansion this year, and that company's really taken off. Another one that Zach kind of alluded to is a company that I've been pretty impressed with so far, called Avoca. And they're providing call answering services today, really for overflow after hours, right? So at the end of the day, when an HVAC or plumbing company kind of shuts down, obviously they want to continue to get leads. So historically, they've hired kind of a third-party service to answer phone calls, and now they're turning to platforms and these AI agents like Avoca to take on that as a service. And I think that we're going to continue to see things like that explode into 2025. But in terms of 2024, those would be my biggest innovators in the markets that we kind of operate in.
Ryan, do you have any big innovators?
So I'm gonna change. I'm gonna innovator / trend / whatever that I think you've seen, and that I think you're really gonna start to see. I think you're gonna see, and this isn't technology related, but I think that you're going to see more and more brands utilize item 18 of the FDD.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I think, like if you go back 5-10 years ago, it was, like 15 years ago, and even 10 years ago, it wasn't uncommon to see an FDD not have an item 19. And now it's really, really rare to see an FDD without an item 19. Even in brand new emerging brands, their first FDD will have an item 19 in it. And it was just because it's such a valuable piece for your brand to have an item 19. But right now, how often do you see an item 18 with a public figure that endorses a franchisor as part of a franchise system? And I think because of social media, because of all this stuff and the presence that public figures have, I think we are going to see an explosion of public figures advertising franchises and being part of franchise brands. I think you're going to see more and more FDDs and item 18.
That's a very good hot
talked
take.
about.
It's a very good hot take. My answer is going to dovetail what Zach and Jamie talked about. So Zach, if you recall, that conversation happened, I think it was with an organization called Valiant AI, and they're kind of one of the leaders in the restaurant space. I haven't followed them tremendously closely, but that's what their website says. in kind of drive-through conversations. And I remember that was years and years ago. That might have been in like 18 when I first met this guy. And that actually set me on the path of like really digging into and looking at this. And this is prior to large language models really kind of hitting the forefront with what I call the big moment in GPT land. And I was just fascinated. I thought it was kind of like Elon sending rockets to space. I'm like, that sounds awesome, but I don't understand. I don't really get the market, and how dumb was I to look at that? It's like my MySpace moment when I thought it was going to be bigger than Facebook, because it was at the time. But the point is that conversational AI. So the range of applications for this, and right now we have organizations that do this prescriptively very well. But I want you to think about two things. One, everything boils down to the economics of franchisor and franchisee, but it all is around how do I make my franchisee more profitable? Think about this. And so I can go down several different paths here, but like even as full self-driving and Tesla's future with the robo-taxis and Uber's future and Amazon looking at purchasing Waymo, which was rumored, and I don't know that that's going to happen or makes a ton of sense, but that kind of last mile is going to be solved. So think about the economics. And this is a big political kind of friction point for several different reasons. But you have drivers that are going to be rendered more replaceable. You have technologies that are going to help drive down costs for operators, but you're going to also have the emergence of new ways to make money, AKA having a fleet of these things. And so as I look at it, I think of two things. One, on the conversational side, that company Rilla, Jamie, I learned about that from Jeff Duden and Michael O'Driscoll at Homefront Brands, and they told me about it. I said, that is such a crazy, awesome application, because you have plumbers who aren't salespeople, but you can coach them on how to better serve the customer and how to better ultimately win business or be helpful for the customer, which will lead to more business. And so that's having a profound effect. There's other implementations of conversational AI, both in the consumer-facing lens, in the franchisee to franchisor-facing lens, and from the franchisor to its own franchising, LLC or incorporated entity. And so there's these constellations of tools that are forming. There's leaders that are emerging and sectorize along those three veins that I think are going to have a far bigger impact than people realize, quicker than they realize. I said this at Springboard when I gave kind of like the morning of day 2 last year. I kind of broke down some of this, and some people thought I was kind of a little bit crazy by the macro numbers that I talked about. We're literally talking about like as US and global GDP is around 100 trillion. That whole stack is going to be moved around, and large swaths of different sectors will change. And so conversational AI, systems of intelligence, like being able to have your stacks in line to be able to take advantage of this. And if I think about a company like Scorpion, which has proprietary dashboards that you build, and you have the web data and the feeders of all these different things. And so don't you understand that system will be more effectively able to deploy ads and make budget decisions than a human, right? And so in every single lens that you look at it along those three constellations, there's so artificial intelligence, if I were to kind of to boil it up at its highest level, and I think in my notes I had a better way to frame that if I can find it, but I can't find it.
I thought you just I thought you winged all of that. It was amazing, but
no. It was still great, by the way. I did wing all of that, but it had kind of the same theme. I had a nicer bow that I was going to call like, because I'm tired of the buzzword bullshit. So like right now, what's happening is you have a kind of traditional built software, and they can slap AI on it, and obviously that's kind of hard to vet. And so opportunities and challenges, as with anything, but fascinating time that we live in. I violated my own rule and talked too much. So let's go ahead and move to leadership. 2024's biggest leadership move. Zach, let's be brief on these as possible.
For the sake of not stealing Jamie's, because I think that's like the most well talked about one. I think technically the leadership move that to me probably made the most sense is, due to a deal actually happening, Matt Aller really becoming the steward of both Franchise Update Media and the IFA's properties, I think is a pretty big one. The deal is kind of pending at the moment still, but I would say pending,
And very controversial.
Very controversial, but I would say to many, but I think in the long run, that probably will be a pretty major moment. It puts the IFA back in the driver's seat when it comes to, advertising opportunities and traditional through newsletters, through a lot of the things that Franchise Update has. It gives them, 2 other conferences. And might I add, probably the most profitable conference in all of franchising was owned by Franchise Update. So that sure doesn't hurt. So I think that there's just a lot of interest that I have on that. Politically speaking, I won't necessarily comment much further than that, but I would say it is really interesting. I think that is a pretty interesting thing to go for.
Well, I think that the franchise lobby having greater reach and power is a good thing, and that's awesome, man. That was a good one. Jamie, what about you?
I mean, I've got 2 kind of coming out of the same org, but I think one would be a Neighborly hiring Mike Davis as CEO. Of course, anybody that's been around franchising knows the tragic story of what happened with Mike Bidwell a couple of years ago and his passing. But and then out of that same org, Mary Thompson leaving and going to be CEO of B&I Global. I think that those were both really bold moves from both very big and established companies, and I think that both are going to pay back pretty strong in the next couple of years. So that's my answer.
My answer is something and that's an excellent one. And I will also give credit to Steve Hockett, who was slated to be the IFA chairman the next year. Mary Kennedy was supposed to be this previous year. He stepped in, and that was definitely a bold move, kind of a very tragic event. Bidwell was just absolutely and utterly phenomenal. Yeah. And that entire organization adored him. But that's a really good one. Mine is something I've already said, and that is Shane Evans stepping back in as the CEO role. I guess really her board hiring her back, and so that was a bold move. Ryan, any bold moves that come to mind?
No, I probably would have said Shane. I probably would have said the same thing.
So, guys, I want to get this doesn't necessarily have to be industry. It could be industry or personal, but what is your biggest lesson learned in 2024, however you want to shake that down, Zach?
I think my biggest lesson learned was that I think there's a lot of people on the supplier side that really don't have as much regard for franchising as I would like. I think that's something that I learned a lot in our time together, Ryan, through Franchise Supplier Network. I think it's something that you and I are constantly battling every day to make sure that people understand. It's a year of learning in a lot of ways for that, but I think that part of our mission still every day is to make sure that people have as much adoration for this industry as we all do. And I think that the lesson that I learned this year is that it's impossible to expect people to love it as much as we do, but I think it just comes with time.
Jamie, that's awesome, Zach.
Yeah,
Jamie.
Agreed, Zach. I think mine was just from a leadership perspective, like learning to trust data more than I probably historically have, and to make decisions quickly and with conviction and with like a high level of focus on execution based on data. I mean, I think that I've always been a data guy to a point, but I think one of the things that serves me well personally is I've got a good gut. I can assess situations. I think my level of kind of self-awareness around EQ is pretty positive. So I lean into that a lot when it comes to making decisions. And I think this year I just learned to be a little bit more disciplined on when my gut said one thing and the data said something else. Don't spend too much time deliberating between the two. More often than not, trust the data. And then, like I said, make decisions quickly with a lot of conviction, and then with a big focus on execution. So carrying that into 2025.
Super solid. Super, super solid. Ryan, biggest lesson 24.
I mean, it's a one you learn over and over, but really in franchising, it's about the franchisee. If you focus your decisions on making your franchisees more money, it's really, really hard to be wrong. And I think you continually see brands, whether they're emerging brands or legacy brands, if they make that choice to do what's right by the franchisee, they end up being successful.
Completely agree. And also, if you're a supplier to franchise organizations, same thing, right? Mine is fewer, bigger, better. And Ryan, it's funny because you say this is you learn something, you relearn it, and it's part of the decision set for Franchise Supplier Network. We have some massive changes, but in short, fewer, bigger, better. I'm also a partner at Cornerstone Franchise Partners. I do this podcast. We have events that we host. All of it connects together, but really just kind of honing and defining my focus within, those teams and or investments. And for me, it's just laser focus and fewer, bigger, better. And, part of it is also, personally how we started off this episode is I like really fewer, bigger, better within the buckets, the couple of buckets that I swim in, but also just sharing more of my point of view and being more of me and not the kind of the box that people want to put you in. And so, and to me, that translates down into fewer, bigger, better. So
I'll go here. The other thing I learned, can't be late for wedding planning stuff. So before Zach has an anxiety attack, Zach, go.
We'll let Zach go first,
it's hurting me, my friend.
I don't want to cut this one short because I want to get to it. But Zach, as you say this and then dip out, 2025 belief that you stand on alone. Do you have a contrarian take on something that maybe most don't see? What say you on this?
I think if I had to choose more than anything, I believe that, I kind of spoke on it earlier. I think that the health, wellness, and beauty space is going to have a really big year, in my opinion. I think that there's just going to be a lot of consolidation, a lot of noise. And I think I'm contrarian in that because, as we kind of hit earlier, it's very trends driven. And I think that when you're looking at it right now, people are hurting economically, I would say. And so you would believe that anything that is related to disposable income probably wouldn't have a great year. I think when I think about it, buzzy, I think is really the word that comes to mind for me, as I kind of hinted at. A lot of consolidation that is long overdue, not only in fitness, I think, with the big player and exponential, but also I would say in beauty, there's a lot of consolidation and a lot of platforms currently being built that I think that there's just, there's going to be a lot of consolidation there. And I would say, most importantly, I think that we're really going to figure out if all of these wellness brands that have some suspect, services that some believe are suspect, some are not. The jury is out. I think that we're going to that's all going to come to a head this year. And a lot of people that are very bullish, on that industry would argue that, it's going to continue. The train's going to keep on rolling, but I'm not entirely sure I agree. So that's something that a lot of people are very excited about, is that wellness space within beauty, health, wellness, fitness. To me, I'm not as excited. So I think that I'm interested to see what happens, because I think that there's just a lot of murmurs one way or the other, and it's very it's like cilantro. Nobody's in the middle. Everybody's one way or the other. So we don't really know what's going to happen there.
Cilantro. That's great. Love you, Zach. I know that you're probably going to have to go. Jamie, what is your belief that you stand on? Perhaps
I'll give mine, and I got to jump too. Mine is directly contrarian to, I think, a comment that Google's or Alphabet's CEO made about how dramatically search on Google is going to change in early 2025. I actually don't think it's going to change that much. I think that until an OpenAI, ChatGPT, for those of you that may not know that that's the owner of the product, but until an OpenAI or Perplexity or some other search engine delivers a better overall consumer search experience, Google's not going to rush to disrupt its core business. Gemini has actually gotten quite good from my point of view. And I know like there are early adopters like the three of us that probably have, Gemini and ChatGPT on page one of our apps on our iPhones, and I use it all the time. I just don't think that Google core search is going to change a whole lot to disrupt themselves until somebody comes along and kind of forces their hand to do that. So
yeah,
that's going to be tough.
Yep.
I don't know if you have tried, dude, but the Google, I forget the name, the category name, but it's basically the deep research.
Oh, it's great. It's great. No, it's fantastic.
Incredible.
It's fantastic. But I'm talking more about the transactional search, right? Like I'm looking for a business type searches right now. One thing we are seeing is like queries are becoming different, right? You're getting kind of longer form questions. But again, Google is still serving results against that. I'm talking about consumers shifting from using core Google search to something else, right? To interact with and discover products and or services. I just don't think that that's going to change a whole lot at Google proper unless a company kind of forces its hand to do it. Right?
But here's the thing though, the only company that's big enough to force that move is Google. Right. So I think it's a lot more likely that because Google changes their stuff, that's the way the change happens versus the consumers finding something else somewhere else that forces Google to change. It's Google. Legitimately, I think they're the only people big enough that could push that change.
I don't know. I mean, you could argue Llama or even X. They're doing a lot of innovation there around Grok and Llama, but again, they're not a destination search function, right? So anyway, so it sounds like I may not be the only one that believes that, but I thought, when I read an article about the Alphabet CEO talking about how Google or how search was going to dramatically change, I was kind of like, I don't buy it. So, all right, guys, I got to run too. This has been a lot of fun. Look forward to do it again soon. See you guys.
Same.
All right.
Thank you, Jamie. We'll finish up and close this out solo, Rye. My biggest, what I would say is contrarian belief is that I think that we're sitting on kind of the front side of what I would call the great franchise renaissance. That sounds grandiose. I think that there are social, there are economic, there are technological drivers of this. And so I think specifically over 2025 and 2030, there's just so much that is happening, can happen, and all the rest. So as you kind of look at like part of the topics that we've discussed today, I believe, and I know, like just historical data shows it because there's been a widening of wage gaps. But I think that what's defined as middle class historically is no longer middle class. I think I read an article that said, in order to be middle class today, you have to have a household income, of something that was somewhere on 3 times to 4 times larger than what historically people would think about middle class. There's several different reasons for that, but as wage gaps kind of separate further and as technology eats jobs, I think that more people will be wanting to get more out of life. I think I'm also jaded by the fact that I love franchising, but business ownership is really the only known mechanism that can empower people to create financial independence and or abundance or whatever it is that you're seeking out, or really kind of just more purpose in what you do. Franchising as a business model helps people get into business ownership faster with less risk than starting from scratch. It crosses more than 200 different industries. And as AI, robotics, other technological developments, I think that this will propel franchise brands forward more effectively than standalone businesses. Kind of that Jamie mentioned that you're competing really with the local. You're not really competing with other franchises. You're competing with those other local businesses. I just think that franchise brands will be able to invest kind of more into that machine. I think there's more points of data and resources that have ultimate human capital with incentives on the line to drive the economics of business. You basically have like artificial intelligence. A lot of it is just data. You have all these different nodes and pockets of data, and that's what you have in a franchise organization. And I think that the power of brand and the human relationships, the human element and getting out in the market, the human capital and the financial interest, I think that franchising will propel faster than these standalone businesses. And I think it's going to be harder for them to compete. So
can I say something though that I think could impede that? I think you're right on the desire there.
Yep.
But what we've seen over the last few years is it's getting more and more expensive to get into franchising. This is going to go back to what we talked about at the very first with like all of the broker deals and that kind of stuff. But you're going to have, so I think people are going to want to do that. You're going to have the shakeup. But we have record consumer debt right now, right? There's record credit card debt.
Yes.
There's record interest rates. There's fewer people being able to buy a home. There's fewer people being able to take out a second mortgage or a HELOC on their home, right? And then simultaneously, the costs of getting into franchises are continually going up, primarily because we keep raising the initial franchise fee and forcing them to buy more and more stuff when they do it. And so there's gonna have to be, to your point, there's going to have to be some major changes in the franchise industry to meet that demand that you're talking about. Because I think you're right. I think the demand and the desire will be there from people, but I think we are continually limiting people's ability to do that by the way we're setting things up. So like brands are, and look, you and I talk about this all the time, but like brands are going to have to figure out how can I get the money to help these people launch their business.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And there's the other contrarian take on what I was saying is barriers to entry to do things like create branding and get tools to help grow the business is going to become easier and easier. But I predict that it's think about the core of a franchise brand is the brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's three things that constitute a franchise brand. It starts with a trademark, right? So the other thing that I'll say, and I have lunch with some friends over at MPK. Shout out to MPK. So I have to wrap up, but I would say, like, I could go on the Wayback Machine and talk about how did countries expand empires? How did churches expand? They expanded through essentially a franchise model. They would have essentially royalty paid back to the local lord or this or that or the other. And so franchising is not a new concept. It became popularized in the early, like mid 1800s to late 1800s and the sewing machine sector, this and that. What created the first major boom in franchising was the fact that we had infrastructure build out. We had a pre and post World War II in America. We had this massive investment in the highway systems, which all of the major sectors that you can think of, even the ones that you wouldn't think about as franchise brands, being car dealerships and the like, the hotels, restaurants, all of the different things, suburbia. All of these things literally created franchising. And what my argument is that there is a next level of infrastructure being laid and built. And yes, there's going to empower a lot of people to be an entrepreneur DIY by themselves, but a lot of people are going to have the path to entrepreneurship and not be alone. And I think there's a taste for that. And so that's why I think that we're going to have a little bit of shakeup. The last thing I'll say, data. So there are around 4,000 franchise organizations in the world across hundreds of sectors. Today, franchising represents I didn't look at the latest today, but I just know this historically, but in 2023, because the 24 report I don't think is out yet, but you're looking at around 3.4 to 3.5% of gross domestic product, but yet franchising employs 9 million people. And so as I think that especially in certain sectors that we are going to see franchising rise as a percentage of GDP. as brands leverage these tools to help people drive better and better economics. And I think that desire on the one side and solving some of the challenges that you mentioned will equate to a lot more success through franchising. So that's my contrarian belief. It's a contrarian belief to say that I think franchising as a percentage of GDP could actually grow by a significant amount over the next decade. And that's my contrarian belief. So sorry for the soapbox.
No,
but,
word. I agree.
Yeah. Well, we'll move this episode to close so I can get to my lunch meeting. But thank you, everybody, for watching. Zach and Jamie, Ryan, this was phenomenal.
If you
Ryan,
made it to the end, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I'll send you my favorite book.
Love it, dude. I love your favorite book, by the way. Well, one of them, is it The Alchemist? I was reading about it last night. Phenomenal book. I watched Paolo on a YouTube video last night, just randomly popped up on my feed. But Ryan, it's a pleasure working with you and talking to you every day, brother. And I'm sure I'll talk to you in the next couple of hours. But thank you, everybody, for listening, and cheers.
Thank you.